Hi, hello, welcome to my channel. Today in this session, we are going to understand about the mechanism of breathing from the breathing and exchange of gases chapter. Already in the previous session, we have discussed about the breathing and respiration. Differences between the breathing and respiration also we have understood. So now let's try to understand about the steps of respiration and mechanism of breathing. What are the steps in the respiration? First step in the respiration is that pulmonary ventilation, means breathing. When we inhale the air and we exhale the air. And the second step, when we inhale the air, what happens? It enters into the lung alveoli, means lungs, their exchange takes place, right? From the lungs, it enters into the blood. From the blood, carbon dioxide enters into the lungs, means gas exchange between the alveoli and blood takes place. And what is the third step? Generally, the carbon dioxide which comes to the lungs is transported by the blood, and as well as which entered into the lungs also transported by the blood only, gas transport, right? Next step is that gas exchange between the blood and tissues. Whenever the oxygen enters in whenever the oxygen reaches to the cells or tissues, then what happens? It enters inside the cells, and the carbon dioxide which is produced, it enters into the blood, means gas exchange occurs between blood and tissues. The next step is that cellular respiration, means whatever the oxygen entered, by this oxygen, oxidation process takes place, breakdown of glucose molecules will be taken place, then carbon dioxide is produced, right? So this process is called what? Cellular respiration or tissue respiration. So these are the steps we can observe in the respiration process. The first one is the pulmonary ventilation. Second one is the gas exchange between lung alveoli and blood. Third one is the gas transport. Fourth one is the gas exchange. Fifth one is the cellular or tissue respiration. Now let's try to understand about the mechanism of breathing now. So in the breathing, there are two steps. One is the inspiration and another one is the expiration. What are they? What is the inspiration? Active intake of air from the atmosphere to lungs. So whenever we inhale the air, that air comes from the atmosphere to lungs. Okay, it enters into the lungs. What is expiration? Whatever the carbon dioxide came to the lungs, it will be expelled out from the lungs to atmosphere. So this expelling air from the lungs is called expiration, and intake of air from atmosphere to lungs is called inspiration. Inspiration is also known as inhalation. Expiration is also known as exhalation. Okay, now let's try to understand about the mechanism of breathing, how this inhalation and exhalation process take place, right? So now first, in the inhalation process or the inspiration process, what happens? Diaphragm muscles, they contract. So these are the diaphragm muscles. Look at this diagram, and here dome shaped muscles are there. This is the diaphragm. Okay, these are the diaphragm muscles, they contract. Whenever these diaphragm muscles they contract, what happens? They become flat like this. Okay, then what happens? Obviously this anterior posterior direction, okay, obviously in the vertical volume, what happens? Increases. Vertical volume increases from the mouth to anus toward. This is called vertical. Okay, vertical volume increases. Anterior posterior direction, this is called what? Anterior posterior direction. What is anterior posterior direction? From the mouth to toward the anus side or stomach side is called what? Antero-posterior direction. This antero-posterior direction volume, this area increases, this volume increases. Okay, because of what? Because of this diaphragm muscle contraction. Okay, contraction of the diaphragm muscles. What happens? Vertical volume increases. So next, external intercostal muscles contracts. At the same time, what happens? The muscles which are present between the ribs from the outside are called external intercostal muscles. They contract, they start contracting. Because of the external intercostal muscle contraction, what happens? Ribs and sternum both are lift up. Then obviously from the dorsal and ventral. So generally this is the ventral side, this is the ventral side, and this is the dorsal side. So what happens? Dorsoventral axis increases. Dorsoventral axis increases because of the external intercostal muscle contraction. You have to remember here, diaphragm, whenever the diaphragm contracts, what happens? Antero-posterior axis increases. Whenever the external intercostal muscles contract, ribs and sternum lift up, and volume of the dorsoventral axis will be increased. Okay, will be increased. So that is why Thoracic volume means whatever the chest volume increases, thoracic pressure decreases. Whenever the thoracic volume increases, inside the pressure decreases, obviously, right? Lungs expand, then air rushes from outside to inside, and lungs expand, pulmonary volume increases, intrapulmonary pressure decreases. That is why what happens, air moves from outside to inside. So whenever the volume increases here in the chest cavity or thoracic cavity, pressure decreases. So that is why what happens, air rushes from outside to inside. So this happens in the inspiration process. I hope you are getting. Now let's try to understand about the expiration step. Okay, what happens in the expiration process? Intercostal muscles, diaphragm relax. Whatever the contracted, they get relaxed now. Thorax again, thoracic cavity, what happens? Thorax regains its original position. Before this, what happened in the inspiration process? Expanded. Now what happens? It relaxes. It regains its original position, relaxes. Now obviously thoracic volume, what happened? Decreases. The volume will be decreased here. Pulmonary pressure, what happens? Pulmonary volume decreases and pressure increases. Pulmonary volume decreases, pressure increases. So air, obviously this area is pushed. So that is why what happens, because of this pressure, air moves outside. Like this, exhalation or expiration process takes place. Whatever the contraction taken place in the inspiration process, same muscles, intercostal muscles and as well as the diaphragm muscles, they get relaxed. That is why what happens, obviously muscles, thorax regains its original position, means comes to its original position. Thoracic volume decreases, pressure increases. Pulmonary volume also, means lung volume also decreases. So pressure increases, air moves outside. So that is why opposite to inspiration, almost all in the expiration process, what happening, opposite to inspiration process taking place. Okay, during forceful expiration, look at this line. During forceful expiration, abdominal muscles and internal intercostal muscles contract. Whenever we want to expire or exhale forcefully, then abdominal muscles and internal intercostal muscles get contracted. This you have to remember. This is a very important point. Okay, right. So like this, inhalation and exhalation process takes place in the thoracic cavity, right? Thank you. If you like my session, please like, share and subscribe my channel, and please